It begins with a number no one in Pozzuoli wants to hear. Over 600 earthquakes in a single month, thousands in a year. And the ground keeps rising. Tonight we walk the streets where families sleep with their doors propped open, where shopkeepers count fresh cracks in plaster, where fishermen nervously tie their boats tighter to the quay. This isn't distant science. It is a living, moving threat beneath their feet. Imagine a slow tide pushing up under your neighborhood. Roads bend, chimneys split, and old masonry that has stood for centuries begins to shift. Scientists call it bradyseism, ground uplift, driven by pressure beneath the caldera. But for residents, it is the sound of dishes trembling on shelves and a community measuring every tiny tremor on a phone. In this video, we'll show you how to spot the first signs of structural damage, explain the physics behind the uplift, and tell you what to do if your house. Right now, monitoring stations around the caldera register steady GNSS, uplift, and telltale in fringes centered near the Solfatara Pozzuoli area. Seismometers are lighting up with shallow quakes concentrated at 1 to 4 kilometers depth. Thermal sensors on fumaroles show fluctuating temperatures. These are not disconnected data points. Together, they tell a story of fluids pressurizing the shallow hydrothermal system, stressing rocks, and quietly reshaping the city's foundations. But what does that mean for a family in Pozzuoli? Picture an elderly woman living in a 3-story masonry house. Last month, she found a hairline crack across the bedroom ceiling. Next day, the crack widened after a night of small quakes. The local engineer told her the crack is consistent with differential uplift, one part of the house rising faster than another. Her fears are human, immediate, and solvable if action is taken early. We will take you step by step through the observational evidence that matters. GNSS time series curves showing millimeters of monthly uplift in SAR images, revealing a deformation center offshore, and a seismic heat map calendar that marks clusters of felt quakes. We'll also translate that data into practical visual checks you can perform in a single afternoon. Where to look for diagonal wall cracks, how to test for stuck windows and doors, and what visible signs on roofs and chimneys suggest progressive damage rather than a static hairline fissure. Throughout, expect candid interviews with local residents and short expert soundbites that cut through alarmism. We are not here to sensationalize, we are here to inform and equip. By the end of this segment, you will understand why small, persistent uplift matters more than an isolated headline quake, and you will know the first 5 immediate actions to protect life and property if you live in the Campi Flegrei zone. Stay with us. The next section dives into the raw numbers and shows the exact monitoring plots every resident should be able to read. We'll overlay GNSS moving averages, show the INSAR interferogram in motion, and annotate the hotspots where damage has been reported. If you live in Naples, Pozzuoli, or the surrounding towns, this is essential viewing. Before we move on, a short warning. Gradual uplift often lulls people into complacency because changes are measured in millimeters, not meters. Millimeters accumulate into centimeters, then into damage that intersects daily life: cracked plaster, compromised foundations, and disruption to utilities. That slow escalation is why early detection and simple household checks can prevent catastrophic losses and give authorities time to plan targeted responses. Act now. Awareness saves homes and lives starting today. Now we look at the evidence, the hard numbers, and the visual signs you can trust. First, imagine the GNSS station Rurit as a ruler anchored in the bay. Its time series shows small, steady steps upward. Millimeters adding up month after month overlay a moving average, and the trend becomes undeniable. a persistent uplift signal that does not vanish with a single storm or tidal change. The GNSS curve rising while a small counter ticks millimeters and then centimeters. Next, an INSAR interferogram appears. Concentric fringe patterns centered slightly offshore near Solfatara and Piciarelli. These color bands are not art. They are the ground telling us where deformation concentrates morph the interferogram into a shaded relief map. Then zoom to show how the maximum uplift area aligns with clusters of shallow earthquakes in the seismic heat map below. A calendar-style heat map lights days with high counts, linking them visually with increases in shallow seismicity. This coupling, thermal anomalies, gas pulses, and uplift, is the forensic signature of pressurized fluids migrating in the shallow hydrothermal system. Then simplify the mechanism using a clear animation. Picture a sealed bottle in the ground. Heat and fluids accumulate, pressure builds, and fractures open like microvalves. Reveal a cross-section tomography slice, showing a fracture zone between 3 and 5 kilometers depth. Now transition to practical checks viewers can do at home. First, doors and windows. Walk to a frame, open it, and note if it sticks in one corner, a classic sign of differential movement. Second, diagonal cracks over doorways or along arches often indicate shear. Show close-ups of masonry with ruler overlays, measuring crack width and progression. Third, chimney lean and separation at roof junctions. Dramatize with a slow pan and chalk mark indicators. Fourth, utility signs interlace these practical checks with a brief human vignette. A young father who found his bakery oven shifted and whose family relocated temporarily after a structural assessment. He calmly recounts documenting damage, calling an inspector, and sleeping elsewhere until a fix was recommended. His lived example shows early action, prevents panic, and preserves life. Explain simple triage for homes. Photograph every crack with date stamps, mark changes with chalk to measure growth, and keep a log of events matching tremor dates. If cracks widen after quakes or show new offset, stop interior work, avoid DIY fixes on load-bearing walls, and contact a licensed structural engineer. End this section with a clear reminder: small millimeters today can become centimeters tomorrow. Now we must examine a critical layer of this crisis: the 8 words no one wants to hear. Alert levels are lower than lived reality. Official bulletins often state stability, yet residents wake to fresh tremors and widening cracks. This gap between institutional reassurance and daily experience fuels anxiety. You must understand why that gap exists and how to navigate it responsibly. Begin with the psychological landscape. Imagine a classroom in central Pozzuoli, where children pause mid-lesson as a tremor rolls under their desks. Teachers act calm, but students watch their faces carefully. Schools practice drills, yet parents tell us their real fear is not evacuation, it is uncertainty. When will it happen? When will it happen? Who will call it? Will traffic allow escape? This emotional tension is as real as any seismic reading. When data and life collide, tension rises, and trust begins to fracture. Now, visualize a short animation. A street in Pozzuoli overlaid with transparent icons showing weak points of infrastructure. Ports where uplift risks grounding boats. Narrow roads that may bottleneck during evacuation. Water and gas pipelines crossing deformation zones. Add a simple checklist that appears one line at a time. Know your route, know your backup route, keep physical maps. Avoid dependence on phone networks during crisis. Shift to expert insight. Picture a specialist, calmly explaining that uplift is not always a countdown to eruption. Often it is a signal of gas and water reshaping the subsurface, changing permeability, creating new pathways. Caprock layers, once sealed, may be gradually fracturing. Migration of fluids does not always lead to lava. Sometimes it creates creeping damage that breaks property long before a single eruption begins. Viewers must understand that risk is not binary. Now contrast two potential paths. First scenario, no eruption, but increasing uplift and seismicity force, repeated evacuations and costly repairs. Ports disrupted, schools moved, insurance premiums rise, daily life becomes unstable. Second scenario, shallow magma pushes upward and meets weakening caprock. Pressure encounters fractures formed by years of stress. A rapid event follows. Not necessarily catastrophic, then introduce a practical toolkit viewers can mimic. First, establish a personal watch list. Note uplift trends, watch monthly quake counts, spot patterns that increase. Second, collect essentials, documents, medication, small cash. Conclude this segment by reasserting that numbers alone are not enough. This crisis lives in lived experience. The rising ground does not knock on doors, it shifts them. It does not shout, it whispers through cracks. Each viewer must become their own early warning system. Every check, every photo, every note builds protection. The next part will show the crucial thresholds to watch and how to read daily data like a scientist. Now we arrive at the most important moment of this entire video, the chapter where information turns into preparation. The most common mistake people make is thinking that a warning will arrive with sirens, loudspeakers, or an emergency broadcast. Begin with seismic pacing. When daily quake counts suddenly increase, or swarm activity compresses into shorter timeframes, it may indicate pressurized fluids accelerating beneath the caldera. Keep a personal note. If tremors occur at night more often, or shift to shallower depths, that may signal stress redistribution. When magnitude stays low but frequency rises, it does not mean safety. It can mean the system is making room, creating pathways, preparing movement now, gas and heat. Fumarole areas respond before most people expect. Notice unusual warmth in the soil, sulfur smells in the air, steam that lasts longer than before, or surface discoloration around vents. If matched with seismic activity, pay attention. If paired with uplift acceleration, monitor closely. If you live nearby, never ignore changes that appear in patterns. One day might mean little, but 3 days with unusual smells or warmth should be logged immediately. Let's talk about the human heartbeat of this crisis. Picture a family sitting after dinner. Their teenage son checks tremor reports on his phone. Their grandmother remembers tremors from decades ago, but says these feel different. Now imagine evacuation. Not in panic, but in order. Each person carries a small bag with water, medicine, ID, chargers, and basic tools. They keep a paper map. Not just GPS on a phone. They know one route, and they know the backup. Move toward the close with suspense. The caldera beneath Campi Flegrei is not just geography, it is memory. It remembers past pressure. It remembers Monte Nuovo rising from the ground in 1538. It remembers the unrest of the 1980s. It remembers everything, even when people forget, and it sends messages. In data, in tremors, in subtle shifts under our homes. We must listen now. Ivavanodi. If you found value in this video and want more real-time updates, then please consider subscribing. It costs nothing, but it might be the most important click you make this year.